Chapter 3. Allison made them wait 40 minutes in the lobby, claiming she was running behind. Cynthia didn't believe her for a second. However, when Allison did come, it didn't stop Cynthia from smiling and being gracious in her greeting. She'd kill her with kindness if that's what it took. Allison also put on her fake smile. "If you'll just follow me, I've arranged to have the kids and pets to be at the Rom's residence. That way I can inspect the home." "What do you need to inspect the home?" Cynthia asked. "I always inspect the home of the children appointed to my cases," Allison said. "It's procedure. I'll also be making regular visits, both scheduled and unscheduled, until I feel comfortable leaving the children in your care." "Surely that's not necessary." Cynthia forcibly kept her smile on her face. "I'm the children's aunt, not some foster parent or stranger." "From what I can gather, you've been a bit of a stranger in the children's life," Allison remarked curtly. "They hardly know you since you only visit once or twice a year. I intend to supervise your situation closely." Wonderful, thought Cynthia. She wanted to protest, but one look from Derek had her deciding not to. Derek was better with people than she was. Cynthia tended to take cues from him on how to effectively handle people outside of the courtroom. That sounds great. They all knew she was lying through her teeth. However, Allison could never say that she wasn't cooperative. Cynthia and Derek got into the new minivan that she had rented for the day. The dealership wasn't ready for her to pick up the one that she had purchased, so she'd gone with a rental just in case she needed to transport the kids from the social services building to her sister's house. Cynthia knew that she was going to have to move in. For now, she just had a couple of suitcases of necessities. She didn't want to feel like this was a permanent thing, that her sister was really gone. She wasn't ready to face that. By pretending it was all temporary, it was easier to take each step, even if she was lying to herself. Pulling up in front of the house, Cynthia took a deep breath. "Are you ready?" Derek asked her quietly. He'd been silent for the entire trip, and she was grateful for that. Sometimes he could read her and know exactly what she needed, like when he'd gotten the extra pastry the other day. She knew her thighs didn't need it, and she'd done extra time with her home gym, but it had been exactly what she wanted in the moment. Cynthia nodded. She grabbed her purse and went forward to where Allison was waiting. "Remember," Allison said, "these kids are grieving. They probably won't accept you at first. It's going to take a lot of time and patience to integrate your lives together. Don't push them. Respect their boundaries." Okay. Cynthia tried to remember all of that. For some silly reason, she felt nervous. She was used to being under high pressure, yet here she was, worried about meeting kids she already knew. I can do that. Allison gave her a look that conveyed her doubts, before opening the door. A couple of dogs greeted them with loud barks. "Boomer! Digger!" A little girl ran forward to grab the dogs ineffectually by their collars. "Hi, Aunt Cynthia." "Hi." Cynthia couldn't remember the kid's name. It started with an S. They all did. That was one thing that she thought was odd. Why Alicia would want all her kids to start with the same letter in the alphabet, Cynthia didn't know. "This is Sarah." Allison gave her a look which clearly said Cynthia was in over her head. "I know," Cynthia said defensively. "Hi, Sarah." Sarah giggled. "You already said hi." "I did, didn't I?" Cynthia smiled. "Why don't you take me to the rest of the group?" Cynthia tried to remember as many names starting with S as she could. Sally, Susie, Sylvie, Sean, Sherry, Cheryl, Sam. None of them sounded quite right. She knew she couldn't bluff her way through this. One, because kids were offended if you couldn't remember something as basic as their names. Two, because Allison Greenwell breathing down her neck. Okay. Sarah let go of the dogs and led Cynthia into the living room. There were the 4 other children with a pair of adults. Cynthia introduced herself to the adults. "Cynthia Stone." "Good to meet you, Miss Stone." The male extended his hand. "John Devant. This is my wife, Lucy." "Hello." Lucy shook Cynthia's hand. "It's been a pleasure taking care of the children." "Thank you for looking after them," Cynthia said. She smiled at the kids who watched her. Serena. That was the oldest girl's name. "Hello, Serena." "Hi," responded the girl dully. She didn't particularly look pleased with what was happening. Cynthia could relate a little. Cynthia looked at the boy with the glasses. "Hi, Simeon?" Simon, he responded with a frown. Cynthia winced. Sorry about that. Simon, why don't you introduce me to your siblings? Serena, Sarah, Sean, and Serenity is the baby. He pushed his glasses up his nose. And I'm Simon. Thank you, Cynthia said. Who's he? Sarah asked curiously. Cynthia looked to see she was pointing at Derek. This is Derek Kramer. He's my assistant. Paralegal, thought Derek ruefully. Not that any of the kids would probably know what that meant. Hi, nice to meet you. Hi, they chorused back with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Allison stepped forward, clearing her throat to get everyone's attention. Your aunt will be taking care of you. She will be your primary caregiver and guardian. I'll continue to visit you to see how you are all progressing together as a family. Does it have to be her? Serena asked with a pout. Couldn't the Devons keep us? Your parents have entrusted you to the care of your Aunt Cynthia, Allison said. It was their wish that she look after you. I'm sure you're in very good hands, John Devon commented to Serena. As much as we have enjoyed taking care of you, it's time for your Aunt Cynthia to look after you. I'm sure she will do an excellent job. Thank you. Cynthia gave him a grateful smile. Just then, a parrot swooped into the room, flapping its wings and diving at random people. Why is Peanuts loose? Yelled Simon as he jumped up from the couch, chasing after the bird. Allison shrieked as it tried to land on her head. Serena laughed. Boomer and Digger barked in excitement. Sarah jumped up and down on the sofa. Bad bird! Bad Peanuts! 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 The bird squawked. Get it away from me! Allison screeched. Cynthia didn't much like the bird either, but she was starting to like it more since it was attacking Allison. It likes your perfume, John Devon said, trying to catch the parrot, but the bird swooped away from him. Derek tried to duck out of Peanut's path, putting up his hands to shield himself from the creature. However, Peanut took that as an invitation to land, and perched himself on one of Derek's outstretched hands. He stared at the parrot, a little afraid of it. What do I do with it? Cynthia grabbed a throw blanket and quickly covered the bird like she'd seen Alicia do numerous times. Plucking it off of Derek's hand, she offered the bundle to Simon. Would you like to put him away? Please, lock his cage so we know he won't get out. Thanks, Aunt Cynthia, Simon said with relief as he grabbed Peanuts. I don't know how he got out. I suppose we'll have to open some of the cans of food for the cats to tempt them back out of their hiding places. Cynthia sighed. Cat food smelled, in her opinion. However, every time Peanut was loose and on the rampage, the cats dove for cover. It took hours for them to come out again. Someone should let the dogs out into the backyard until they've calmed down. I'll go do that, Sarah volunteered as she jumped off the couch. Don't jump off the furniture. It's not good for it. She stopped talking as she realized everyone was staring at her. What? I guess you might just get the hang of this after all, Allison said grudgingly. I'm just saying what Alicia would if she were here, Cynthia shrugged. By the way, your hair is a mess. You should comb it. Allison glared at her and patted her head. Thanks. Alicia would have said that too, Cynthia responded. Maybe Alicia wouldn't have, but how would Allison know? Plus, it felt so good to say the words. Petty, but good. Mrs. Greenwell, I'd like to thank you for coming over, but I think we can manage from here. Allison gave an unhappy smile at the dismissal. I'll be back on Thursday at 5 to see how you cope with dinner time. I'm sure we'll be fine, Cynthia gritted her teeth in a smile. Truth was, she didn't cook. Not really. She warmed things up in the microwave. Cynthia would have to figure something out. If Mr. Kramer's going to be in the habit of being around the children, I'll need a vulnerable persons check from him, Allison said sweetly. One can never be too careful. I can provide that, Derek said coolly. He'd never been in any trouble with the law, so he was confident he could get the documentation without any hassle. Good, Allison nodded. Children, if you need to contact me, my office number is on the fridge. I have a question. Derek looked to Allison. Are there any allergies? Are there any medications the children are on? Any medical conditions we need to be aware of? Any special appointments? How about their schedule for school and other activities? Lucy Devon held out a group of paperwork. I wrote everything down that wasn't on Alicia's mom's calendar. There's no allergies. Serenity just went for a yearly checkup, so she's good to go for a little while. The pediatrician's number and address is there. So is the school's information. Derek automatically took the paperwork. Thank you. This will be very helpful. You should give that to Miss Stone, Allison stated smugly. After all, until your vulnerable check comes into my office, I'd rather not have you around the children. We can't be too careful these days. You understand. Cynthia knew Allison was just trying to press a point, leaving her alone with the kids, hoping she'd give up or fail. I've known Mr. Kramer for years. He's been above reproach. That may be, but this is about the children, Allison insisted. I entirely understand, Derek said smoothly. He handed the paperwork to Cynthia. I would expect no less. Derek wasn't going to get into this power struggle between the two women. It would only take a few days for the vulnerable persons check to come through the local police office, and he'd be happy to hand it to Allison personally. Perhaps with a friendly reminder that Allison was going against the wrong woman. One did not go up against a dragon without being properly armed, and Allison certainly wasn't carrying the right weapon or shields. Derek's money was on Cynthia, even if she was out of her depths. Cynthia frowned at him. It was great to meet you all, Derek said to the kids, Mr. and Mrs. Devon. He exited gracefully with the Devons not too far on his heels. I hope we'll see Cynthia and the children at church, Lucy commented. You're more than welcome to join us. That's kind of you. Derek got the details of where the church was and when the service was. He'd have to put it into Cynthia's planner so she remembered to take the kids. Do the Roms regularly attend? Yes, John answered. Guy was a volunteer usher on occasion. They were very involved in the church then. Derek wondered how Cynthia was going to take that. I'll talk to Cynthia about it. They said their goodbyes, and Derek took out his phone to call a cab when Allison came up to him. I hope there are no hard feelings about that, my asking for a police check to clear you, Allison said. Nope, none at all. Derek gave her a friendly smile. It's your job to protect the kids. I wish all caseworkers were as conscientious. Thanks, Allison sighed. How do you work for her? She's efficient, and sometimes ruthless in the courtroom. Derek shrugged. She likes to win. Yeah, I know that, Allison said ruefully. Hey, do you need a ride back into the city? Sure. Derek thought the irony was funny. She didn't want him around the kids without a police check, but she was willing to let him in her car without one. For all she knew, he had a criminal record or a habit of assaulting women. He didn't. However, she didn't know that for certain. Then again, he wasn't about to pass up a free ride rather than pay cab fare. Plus, he wanted to see just how she was going to pump him for information to use against Cynthia. No doubt that was her ulterior motive. Derek wasn't disappointed. A few streets into their journey, Allison casually asked, How long have you worked for Miss Stone? 8 years. Derek told the truth. It was easy enough to check to see by simply calling the firm. Other than disliking Allison, there was no reason to lie anyway. That's quite a long time. I guess you'd say that you know her pretty well, she commented with an assumed air of innocence. I guess so. Derek didn't give much away. He wanted Allison to work for it. He watched the city pass them by. She's a piece of work, isn't she? Allison prodded. Derek decided to agree. Cynthia can be demanding and driven, especially at her job. I'm just gonna say it. Allison decided to get to the point. We both know Cynthia isn't the best choice for these kids. She's not exactly parenting material. She's too selfish and self-absorbed to take care of the children properly. I would appreciate it if you could assist me with any tips or testimony that will get these kids into a better situation. Derek almost smiled. At least she was being honest. You want me to spy on Cynthia and let you know when she messes up? Essentially, yes. Allison gave him a glance, trying to gauge his reaction. That would mean you'd have to waive the need for a vulnerable persons check. Derek shrugged. Otherwise, you're going to miss the prime time for her to mess up while we wait for the paperwork to come through. Right now, she's inexperienced and most likely to have errors, especially with the stress from the funerals. Allison nodded. I see your point. I suppose I could excuse the need for a police check. That's very kind of you. Derek remarked. Personally, he would have preferred that she stuck to her guns and made him get the vulnerable person's check. He would have respected her more for it. I'm going to need something that will stand up in court. Allison made a turn. We both know that she likes to win, and she'll contest any custody decisions I make. She'll say it was prejudiced on our previous court encounters. And you aren't? Derek said mildly. Inside, he was disappointed in Allison. It appeared she was going to put her personal agenda ahead of the good of the Roms kids. That's neither here nor there, she replied curtly. Who gets the kids if Miss Stone is found unfit to be their guardian? He inquired. They'll get put into the system. I'll find them a good foster family, Allison said confidently. The youngest might even get adopted. They'd get split up. Derek knew they would. It happened to a lot of larger families. Probably. It would be better than being under Cynthia's care, Allison stated firmly. I don't see how. Derek pointed to the curb. You can let me out here. What? Allison slowed down, trying to pull over in heavy traffic. I said, I don't see how it would be better for the kids to be split up from each other, especially since they've just lost their parents. In fact, I think it would be detrimental to them to lose each other as well. Derek opened the door of the car. As a previous occupant of the foster care system, I have to say there are a lot of foster parents who would be a worse choice than Miss Stone. I'll have to respectfully decline your offer to spy on her and report back to you. Allison glared at him. You'll regret this. You'll see how she treats those kids and will come to regret your choice today. Derek pulled out his phone. I don't think so, Miss Greenwell. In fact, I've been recording this little conversation of ours and intend to give it to your supervisor so that we can get a caseworker that actually cares about these kids. It will be a refreshing change from our current caseworker who seems to just be furthering her own agenda of revenge. Get out of my car, she hissed. Gladly. Derek got out and resisted the urge to slam the door. He shut off the voice recording feature on his phone, then called Cynthia. How's it going? Great, she said. A few moments later, she said hushed into the phone. It's the most awkward thing ever. They aren't adults. I can't speak to them like adults, but I'm not going to do that gooey voice junk either. What am I supposed to do? Talk to them like adults, he advised. It's easier for you and them. Where did you go hide? The laundry room? She sighed. What's up? I solved the Allison Greenwald problem. Or at least I will once we visit her supervisor tomorrow. Derek smiled. He was very pleased for himself. You owe me. I owe you, she readily agreed. If he had actually solved the Allison Greenwald problem, Cynthia was ready to do cartwheels. How did you do it? I think I'll let you be surprised. Derek waved down a taxi. Gotta go. What? Wait, she protested. Derek ended the call and shut off his phone. Let her stew in curiosity. He had work to get done while she was distracted with the kids. He whistled merrily. Good day today? The cabbie asked. Excellent day, Derek replied with a smile. The next day at social services went really well. Cynthia and Derek reported their concern to Mrs. Greenwell's supervisor, Mr. Davidson. Her supervisor defended her. Derek pulled out the phone and let him listen to what Allison had to say. Mr. Davidson was not impressed. He immediately apologized. He offered to oversee their case personally. Cynthia gratefully agreed. Derek gave her suit jacket a little tug whenever Mr. Davidson couldn't see it. He'd already gotten her promise not to press for any punishment for Allison. It would suit her purposes better to be the bigger person in this case. He tugged on the suit to remind her of her promise, because Derek knew it was just killing her not to ask for some sort of reprimand. Cynthia scowled at him as she kept her word to him. He knew that she thought it was worth it as long as Allison Greenwald was permanently off their case. Derek exited the building with a huge smile on his face. Okay, I owe you, Cynthia grudgingly admitted. That was genius. That was what? He cupped a hand to his ear, leaning toward her. You heard me the first time. Cynthia sniffed, even though she was very grateful to him. How did this morning go? Derek asked. Did you know that matching socks are no longer a thing? Now it's cool not to match socks. Cynthia frowned as she complained. When I was a kid, I would have been caught dead with two different types of socks on. I think you'll find that a lot of things have changed since you were a kid, Derek said dryly. He knew that things had changed somewhat since he was a kid. I guess it went okay overall. Everyone ate and got to school. She shrugged. I didn't know if I was supposed to send them to school or not. I mean, the funeral hasn't happened. Don't people usually stay home until the funeral is over? Then what? Do I stay home from work as well? And now there's family counseling sessions that we'll need to go to as a family and independently, so the kids can work through their grief. Then there's appointments, kids clubs. It's crazy. Their lives are more organized than mine. Somehow, Derek doubted that. Cynthia was organized to the minute of each day. They managed to get halfway through the day before Cynthia's phone rang with the secretary from the school on the other end. Simon wasn't feeling very well and had requested to go home. Cynthia insisted that Derek come with them so that they could work in the car during the drive to the school and at her place. Derek grabbed his laptop. "Why are we getting out here?" Derek asked as they exited the elevators on the ground floor. "Didn't you order the car service?" Cynthia frowned at him. "No," Derek stated calmly. "You can't use the company car service to pick up a kid from school. That's not a business use, and the accountants tend to frown on those sorts of things. We'll use the minivan you rented." Cynthia huffed. "We'll be talking business the whole time. I think that's a perfectly acceptable use of the company car service." "We're going to be talking business when we're on the drive to the Rom's house after we pick up Simon, who happens to be sick? I highly doubt that." Derek punched the elevator button to go to the parking garage. "You did drive in this morning, right?" "I had to," Cynthia shrugged. "No one ordered me the car service to pick me up at the house. Speaking of car services, I need a moving company. You'll have to hire one for me." "Miss Stone, that's a personal matter," Derek protested lightly. He had a feeling he was going to be talked into it anyway, but he had to try. "That is for you to get set up." "You're my PA," Cynthia countered. "I'm your paralegal." "I'm just filling in for your PA while she's on vacation," Derek clarified. "Your business PA, not your personal one. If you want someone to handle all of your personal schedule items, you should hire one." "Missy always did all of my personal stuff." Cynthia hit the panic button on her key fob and followed the amplified sound in the underground parking garage to find the van. "She was excellent at what she did. I suppose you're merely mediocre." "Still not my job." Derek had to raise his voice to be heard over the car alarm. He put a hand to his ear. It was quite loud with the echoing acoustics. "Actually, it is your job right now." Cynthia clicked the alarm off as she unlocked the vehicle. "Put it on your to-do list and make it happen. I want a moving company at my condo next weekend so I can put my stuff at Alicia's house." Derek rolled his eyes as he got into the van. He put it on his list of things to manage. He hoped she didn't expect him to personally oversee the packing and unpacking. "When are you getting the new minivan delivered to you?" "Next week. I get it from the dealership." Cynthia swung out into traffic. At least she'd managed to get that one detail done on her own, Derek thought gratefully. He had enough to do. They talked about cases and technicalities while she drove. Finally, she pulled up in front of the school. Cynthia unclicked her seatbelt and hopped out. "Aren't you coming in?" No." Derek raised an eyebrow. "Why would I?" "I need a second person on file who is okay to pick up the kids," Cynthia stated. "I figured that would be you." "Excuse me?" Derek frowned. "These kids are your responsibility. Don't you have other relatives or friends for this?" "No." Cynthia waited patiently. "I can stand here all day, and poor Simon will be missing out on the comfort of his own bed, or you can just come in and get registered." "I know what this means," Derek growled. He didn't like being pushed into a corner. "It means you're going to expect me to ferry these kids to and from school, that you're going to dump even more responsibilities on me." Cynthia shrugged innocently. "The thought did cross my mind." "What about your uncle?" Derek asked a little desperately. "He has Parkinson's and can't drive," she said sweetly. "You can order up a car service or a taxi," Derek offered a solution. She rolled her eyes. "Do you really see my uncle dealing with children? He's a curmudgeonly old bachelor. You said it yourself when we were talking to Sally Winthrop. He's not fit to raise kids." I meant he shouldn't be anyone's guardian. I didn't mean that he couldn't babysit for a couple of hours for you or be an emergency contact, Derek defended himself. Well, I'm not going to subject the kids to him, Cynthia replied. She knew what he was like since she had to work with him at the firm. Get out of the car and get registered. It'll only take a minute. Is there no one else? Derek didn't want to be responsible for these kids. He didn't even know them. Nope, she answered. You're it. You know as well as I do, I have no personal life. That means I'm choosing you. Great. Derek pulled off his seatbelt reluctantly. Just great. You'll love it. It'll be fun. Cynthia tried to think of what other enthusiastic things she could say to needle him a little bit more. Giving is caring. You can make a difference in these kids' lives. Give it up. A scowling Derek obediently walked beside Cynthia into the school. You're supposed to be their sole guardian, not co-guardianing with me. Sorry about your luck, but you're stuck with me, Cynthia said happily, and by extension, with the kids. Fantastic. Derek didn't muster up any enthusiasm. His fate was sealed. There was no arguing with a dragon. Mrs. Spells, Cynthia greeted the secretary at the school. I've brought along my... Derek waited diligently to see what she'd call him next. He knew it wasn't going to be paralegal. No one let their paralegal pick up their kids from school. My significant other, Derek Kramer, to get registered as a second adult able to intercede on the children's behalf as necessary. Cynthia smiled at the secretary and refused to look at Derek over her big whopper. Derek tried not to choke on his surprise. He didn't quite succeed. Mr. Kramer, are you doing all right? The secretary asked in concern. Fine. Derek cleared his throat and wrapped an arm around Cynthia's waist, pulling her against him. We're great, aren't we, honey? She elbowed him and smiled. Fantastic. Mrs. Spells gave them a funny look, but found the required paperwork to allow the school to release the kids to Derek when necessary. How is Simon? Cynthia asked as Derek began filling out the pages. He's resting in the nurse's office. Simon claims to have a stomachache. The secretary sighed. Poor guy. I think it's just him missing his parents. Cynthia nodded. We all miss Alicia and Guy. We certainly do. Derek had never met them, but he missed them already. Cynthia darted him a look, wondering if he was being sarcastic. However, she smiled at the secretary. Could you give me directions to the nurse's office? I'll go get Simon while Derek finishes here. The secretary happily complied. Derek looked at the paperwork. How long had he known Cynthia? 8 years. How long had they been in a relationship? 8 years. He filled in the information and added his signature with a flourish to the bottom. You have a separate address? The secretary inquired quizzically. Yes, Derek said with sincerely serious expression. Cynthia snores. Loudly. We find it easier right now to keep separate residences. Oh, Mrs. Spell's eyes became round with wonder. Has she tried any of those sleep aids? Derek leaned on the counter and nodded solemnly. Yes, that little nasal strip and the tooth guard thingy. We even tried essential oils. Her doctor is thinking surgery might be her only option, but we're going to give the sleep clinic a try first. That's a good idea, Mrs. Spells responded. I've heard some sleep clinics have had success with certain people. They think she might have sleep apnea and need a CPAP machine, Derek invented on the fly. We'll see what the results are after we join the next clinical trial. In the meanwhile, I feel for those poor kids sleeping in the same house. You did seem a little tired today, Mrs. Spell frowned in concern. Derek sighed dramatically. The windows sometimes vibrate when she snores. Wow, Mrs. Spells blinked. Derek nodded, much maligned. He decided to leave off any mentioning of howling dogs or neighbors yelling. He didn't want to overplay the role. It's been a wedge in our relationship. Otherwise, I'm deeply in love with her and find her compatible in every way. Mrs. Spells patted his hand in a motherly fashion. I'm sure you'll figure out a way to get through this. I hope so. Derek gave a small smile. The sleep clinic is giving us hope. The what? Cynthia asked him curiously as she came back into the office, Simon in tow. Darling, Derek wrapped an arm around Cynthia's waist. "We should get Simon home. He'd probably like to rest." Cynthia looked a bit confused, but allowed him to steer her and the boy toward the office exit. "I'll be praying for you," Mrs. Spells called after them. "Thank you." Derek gave the woman a wave as he pressed Simon and Cynthia out into the hallway. "Praying for us?" Cynthia frowned suspiciously. "She's really concerned over Simon," Derek improvised. "How are you feeling?" Simon shrugged. "I just want to go home." "We can do that." Cynthia gave Simon a pat on the shoulder. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this chapter, please look for the next chapter of Sweet Valentine. Also, please click the bell for notifications so that you don't miss any videos. This is free for you and would really help me grow my audience with the algorithms. Thank you.